Hello and welcome back to the Sports Vehicle Performance channel. Today we're joined by a pair of Porsche 924S's. We're going to be filming a buyer's guide on these great cars. So, the Porsche 924S, a car that offers great 80s styling, great price and a great balance, and that all-important Porsche badge. However, it's not without its issues, and today we're going to be diving in, taking a look and seeing what to look out for if you're thinking of buying one of these. So, we're going to make a start with the engine bay and anything related to it, including the cooling system. So, this car is actually a regularity rally car, so you'll notice a couple of modifications, especially in the interior. So that's why this one looks a bit different. So the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of service history, maintenance. If you're buying a car, check it's got a good history. That's what we always say. It's way more important than the mileage. Most of these cars have done way north of 100,000 miles now and have been around the clock at least once, if not more. So we're going to make a start talking about cam belt, timing belt, and all your water pump. These have also got balance belts as well. So it's very important to keep on top of it and, you know, just check it's been done. Other common things, so oil leaks, cam cover, crank seals, and the sump. That's also very common. A couple of other bits that we've experienced with these more recently. The valve springs, they can basically over time, they'll just, due to age, end up snapping, and then you'll end up with an intermittent misfire, particularly just like low RPM. You won't really notice it otherwise, and yeah, you'll be running through everything, not being able to get to the bottom of it, and it'll turn out it'll be a broken valve spring. Some issues with the coolant side of things, so obviously hoses and stuff on these are really old, starting to crack and go brittle, so you know, have a good look around, check for coolant leaks. Also the radiator core as well is a common thing, so this one to behind us, we've just put a big alloy rad in it. And that just basically massively improves it and also stops, obviously, the leaking radiator. Also, if you're there as well, check the fans kicking in, because that's another common thing, failing and then not being aware of it. You'll be sat in traffic and it'll just be overheating. So if you're going to go and check one out, check it works. And also, you know, the thermostat, that'll also give you an idea if that's operating correctly. So yeah, overall, they're pretty good, reliable engines. But yeah, as I say, maintenance is always key. So next up is the suspension and the steering. So we've got the car at this height here so we can have a look around. So first thing to talk about is going to be the wheel bearings. So with these you need a very fraction bit of play just up and down in the wheel, and that'll just mean they're set right. If you've got them too tight, you'll end up overheating your bearing and have bearing failure. So they're quite critical to get them set up right. So make sure if they've been done, it's done by someone competent. So yeah, generally have a good look round for wearing things like bushes, top mounts, any sort of play. Could be the steering rack, joints, worn control arms, bushings, anything like that. This car here, you'll see more underneath. This has actually been fitted with Powerflex bushes because obviously these rubbers originally been in the car since the 80s. They're not going to be any good anymore. So it's good if they've been replaced and you'll have a nice feeling, solid front end when you take it down the road. Also check the rear of the car. If the rear is sagging low, you may have a problem with your torsion bars. When they sag, it's a bit of a known issue on these. And also just, you know, general checks. Check for uneven tyre wear or knocking at low speeds. That could be a sign of bad shock absorbers. And then generally on the brakes on these, just general wear and tear. They don't get through them, you know, mega quick or anything, and they're fairly cheap to replace. But yeah, just check your disc and pads. You don't want any sort of big lips or, you know, pads that are near the metal. So there was a period where many 924s went unused, unloved and sat around. That obviously then leads to a lot of issues with things like your fuel system. The fuel sits in the tank and corrodes it away. This here, so this car has actually been fitted, we've done it ourselves. It's got a 944 plastic tank. This was done when the 924 metal tank was unavailable, like they've now since remade them. But I think these actually have a slightly larger capacity as well, and with this being a rally car, it makes sense. So yeah, the tank will corrode internally and obviously then send rust fragments through your fuel lines into your injectors and base, just cause all sorts of running problems. So, you know, fire the car up, have a listen to it, it should sound crisp. If it's got any slight misfires, it could potentially be that. Also have a look round, check the fuel pumps for leaks, any signs of wetness, bottom of the tank and stuff. They can also corrode. We've seen them completely, split at the seams from corrosion. Moving on from that now, we'll talk a bit more about the gearbox and the clutch. So obviously on the 924, sort of the transaxle platform 944s as well, you've got the clutch up here in the bell housing, and at the back you've got the gearbox. So, and then obviously the drive is then transferred through the torque tube, which sits above the exhaust. So obviously that then means your gearbox is quite, they're not too bad to get out, but to do a clutch, you've got to take all the torque tube back out the way, and it's a fairly labour intensive job, especially on an old car that's sat around for a while. So you want to make sure that that's kept on top of, and if it's had a clutch, that's a great sign. And yeah, just run it through the gears as well. Try second and reverse, because they're the most likely to grind or resist. It could be a sign of worn synchros. And the clutch bite should be mid-travel. There is actually adjustment on the clutch on these slightly, but obviously a sign of that, it could be a hydraulic issue or anything else. Also, yeah, just watch for like a shuddering on takeoff, or even the clutch slipping. That's also a sign that it's, on its way out. Other things to mention, is the exhaust on these. This car here is actually a rally car, as we said, so you can see it's a bit battered, but the system ages, especially the rear box on them, and corrodes, has holes in, especially when they've sat around. So it's just quite easy to look under the back and see what you can see. And yeah, just, check it over. Gearbox itself is a very good, strong unit. Don't really have any issues on them, because they're originally an Audi gearbox, most of them. So that's obviously proven well built stuff. Do have to check out for leaks and stuff on them, especially from the rear of them, and also the linkages and stuff can go stiff. So especially, as I say, sat around, things dry up. So you've got the linkages on the top of the box up here, and then also in the car as well. So just, feel the shift, it feels nice, you probably haven't got anything to worry about. So we're now going to move on to talking about the bodywork, and in particular, rust. So these generally are quite good for an 80s car. They have some decent factory protection, and they survive fairly well. There are some common areas though, so in particular, battery tray. Under the battery, obviously, it's quite a common thing on a lot of old cars. Battery acid and stuff can eat away at the paint, but underneath the battery, you'll end up with a hole. So you've got to keep an eye on that, and quite an easy area to check yourself. Move round to the rear hatch. So if you lift the carpet and look in the spare wheel well, so we're not going to take it all out in this one, but if you lift it up down there, you can see the wells there behind the rear arches. That's a common area, for rust to start forming any holes. So good place to check. And obviously also under the spare wheel. You got your sills. This car here has actually just had them all freshly done, but just have a good look around, a good prod around. A magnet's always a good thing to take as well, just to check, if they're full of filler or not, to put it simply. And you can do that on a fair bit of the body of the car as well. Some other areas, so the windscreen seals is a common one. So you can look around the edges and just, look for any signs of bubbling or blistering. Yeah, so generally they're pretty good cars. So now we're going to move on to talking about the interior and some common issues on them. So you join me in the interior of the other 924S. So we're going to be going through issues inside the car. So we'll begin with the main one that's glaringly obvious, is the dashboard cracking. So as you can see, this is pretty universal on all 924s and even 944s and a lot of cars of the same age. Sun, eats away and makes it crack and split, and it's very expensive to repair. And that's even if you can find a place who'll do it. And obviously replacement parts are pretty much unavailable, especially for an uncracked one. So yeah, the less cracks the better if you're going to buy a car, but it's very hard to find one without anything. Other things, so all the HVAC controls, and check every button function works, heater works, the radio, check it all works, check your oil pressure and battery voltage, just check it's all reading, because that can be a sign of faulty sensors and even dodgy wiring or anything like that. So check everything's functioning as it should be. Seat bolsters, this car here has actually got leather interior, and it's actually in very nice condition. Car over there has got I think it's the cloth, or it might be half and half in that, I can't quite remember, but that's actually, I think, got some more tears in the seats. Other areas to look at, so the sunroof, just check it seals properly, opens, functions exactly as it should, and you know, if it's leaking, obviously it could be fairly in-depth to put right, depending on what it is. The rear hatch seals as well for your boot, massive piece of glass, big seals. It's a known failure point for leaks, and you'll especially see it when you're washing the car. Electrical system as well, so check your pop-up headlights, because things like that, you know, can easily go wrong. And you know, when they do, as I say, parts are getting quite scarce for these, and you know, just check everything you possibly can, basically, because the less that you find, you know, less you're gonna have to worry about to put right. Even things like the horn, the wipers, all these stalks, they're quite fragile, and especially, you know, they can wear. Check the self-centering, I can't remember what it's called, you know, the correction on your indicators, auto cancels. Check that's working. Dim lights on your dash as well is another thing to look out for. So put all your lights on, get the alternator completely loaded up, and just sit there, and if your lights start to go dim, that could be a sign of a failing alternator. And just have a good look around the car. So these cars, 9 times out of 10 got aftermarket stereos in, both of these have. So have a look around for dodgy wiring, you know, anything that could potentially short out and cause a fire, because you know, these cars have been messed around with now, they're a few years old, and you know, were once at a price point that was, you know, fairly cheap for people to, you know, pick them up and, you know, mess around with them and, you know, cause issues. So yeah, I think that's generally it. Obviously, finally, as we always say, check your windows, because you don't want a window regulator to be failing. It's an easy thing to check. And yeah, I think that's mainly it. Yeah, other thing maybe, check your gear shift, feels nice. We spoke about that earlier, but just check it self-centers, because that could be a sign of a worn linkage. So a couple of things to look out for on road test. If you're going to go and have a look at one, take it on a road test, I would recommend doing that. So the first thing to look out for is, you know, when you start the car, it should fire up very quickly and just sit and idle nicely, you know, cleanly as it should, not putting any smoke out. Obviously a bit of condensation is fine if it's cold. Drive it fairly hard, you know, look for overheating, misfires. You don't want to, you know, you've got to push it to what it's meant to do, because then that will reveal problems. Should feel nimble, not floaty or wallowy, you know, light and eager, not tired and vague. They should be very responsive, and they're a very well balanced chassis, you know, with the engine at the front and all the gearbox out the back. They, you know, really are a good car to drive. Watch for vibrations through the steering wheel. Could be a sign of a few things: worn CV, wheel bearings, as we spoke about earlier, or even a buckled wheel. We've seen these wheels buckle before. Yeah, so just, you know, general things like that, and also just listen on lock for clicking noises as well, because that also is a good sign of a worn CV joint. So yeah, that's some things on road test to listen out for. So to end the video, a good 924S is a hidden gem. Make sure you check out properly what you're buying. You don't want to buy anything that, you know, is going to be full of problems, because you'll spend more on it putting it right than the car's actually worth. So that's never what you want. But yeah, as I say, they're great cars. Very fun to drive, well balanced. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it useful. And if you're thinking of buying one, let us know how you get on. Any advice you want, get in touch, and we're more than happy to assist. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.